Have you ever caught yourself completely lost in thought while driving home, only to realize you have zero memory of the last 5 miles? Or maybe you sat down to work, and before you knew it, an hour vanished into a rabbit hole of random anxieties, past regrets, or hypothetical arguments that haven't even happened. Most of us live under the impression that we are awake, but the truth is, the vast majority of human life is spent in a kind of waking trance. We exist in a state of continuous internal chatter, dragged around by whatever random thought, emotion, or notification happens to pop up next. We aren't really driving the car, we are passengers riding in the back seat of our own minds. Today, we are diving into a discipline designed to fix this exact problem. In classical philosophy, it was known as Nepsis, which translates to inner vigilance, mental sobriety, or pure attention. This isn't about modern mindfulness, where you just sit quietly and watch your stress float away like clouds. It isn't about forced positive thinking either. Inner vigilance is an active, razor-sharp state of internal awareness. It is the art of establishing a silent guardian at the door of your consciousness, a guardian that decides what gets inside your head and what gets turned away at the gate. To understand how to master your attention, you first have to understand the exact mechanics of how a single thought takes over your entire mood. Mental captivity doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds in a very specific 4-step chain reaction. It all starts with what we call the initial impulse. Think of this as a spark. It's the very first millisecond of thought. An image or a memory appears at the fringe of your awareness. Maybe it's a sudden thought about a project deadline, or a random memory of an old argument. At this initial stage, the thought has zero power over you. It carries no emotional weight. It is just a neutral suggestion knocking on the door of your mind. The problem arises at step 2, engagement. This is the moment you open the door and start talking to the thought. You start analyzing it, arguing with it, or entertaining the scenario. The second you engage, you give that thought fuel. That leads straight to step 3, assent and identification. This is where the boundary dissolves. You stop seeing it as just a thought passing through and start believing this is my reality, and I need to be stressed about it right now. Finally, you hit step 4, total fixation. The thought locks in. Your heart rate rises, your posture tightens, and your brain enters a stress response, all triggered by a single, unmonitored impulse that you allowed through the front door 10 seconds ago. Here is the master key to inner vigilance. You have to intervene at step 1. When your internal guardian is awake, you catch that initial spark the exact fraction of a second it appears at the threshold. And instead of fighting it, judging it, or debating it, you do something much more powerful. You simply deny it your attention. Thoughts cannot survive without the fuel of your focus. If you don't engage with them, they starve. They naturally dissolve and recede back into silence. Think of your mind like an airport security checkpoint. An unvigilant mind is an open field where anyone can wander in and out unannounced. A vigilant mind has a clear perimeter. It doesn't mean you become paranoid or tense. It means you develop a cool, spacious indifference to useless thoughts. You let them knock, but you simply don't open the door. This requires shifting where your attention actually lives. Most people operate entirely from the surface of their heads, right behind the eyes and forehead, where all that analytical noise happens. Inner vigilance requires dropping your awareness down into your core, into a deeper, quieter center of presence. When you operate from that quiet center, the external world and your surface thoughts are viewed from a distance. It's the difference between being tossed around in the middle of a storm and watching the rain fall from inside a secure, quiet room. Now, a major mistake people make when they try to master their minds is relying on brute force willpower. They try to forcefully silence their thoughts, fight their anxieties, and command themselves to be calm. Relying on willpower to fight the mind is a trap. Using your ego to fight your ego is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Force creates tension, tension creates fatigue, and fatigue inevitably leads to an emotional collapse right back into old habits. Real vigilance doesn't use force. It uses clarity. It relies on sight, not muscle. Part of this requires stripping away what we call the ego filter. The ego acts like a dirty pair of sunglasses, filtering every event through one question. What does this mean for me? How does this affect my image, my security, or my plans? When someone criticizes you, an unmonitored mind immediately feels threatened and reacts with anger or defense. But a vigilant mind sees the situation for what it actually is, just sound waves carrying words across a room. By withholding personal commentary, you prevent those sound waves from penetrating your peace. You realize that you don't need to control, label, or fix every internal experience. You simply need to observe it without getting pulled into the story. When inner vigilance becomes your default state, rather than a temporary exercise, your entire experience of daily life shifts. First, your perception becomes incredibly sharp. Without the constant background noise of mental commentary, you see reality directly. Colors look brighter, conversations are met with actual focus, and the world stops feeling like a blurred background behind your own worries. Second, you build an unshakable internal stability. Most people's happiness depends entirely on good weather, good news, and smooth sailing. But external conditions are always changing. An individual who anchors their peace in changing circumstances is always one bad email away from a ruined day. Vigilance anchors your awareness in the observer of experience rather than the experience itself. Tragedy and triumph are both recognized as passing weather patterns across a clear sky. Finally, you gain total mastery over time. The uncultivated mind is a continuous time traveler, either dragging around the heavy baggage of the past or worrying about hypothetical futures. But suffering requires a narrative in the absolute immediacy of the present moment, monitored by clear attention. There is no narrative. There is only what is happening right now and the clarity to deal with it. To bring this all together, mastering your life doesn't start with conquering external circumstances, building massive wealth, or trying to manage every person around you. It begins at the single, quiet threshold of your own consciousness. Whoever controls what crosses the doorway of their mind holds the key to their own reality. By stepping back from the river of automatic thought, dropping the need to control every internal wave, and establishing a continuous, quiet guard of pure attention, the mental noise of the world recedes. What's left behind isn't something you have to create. It is the natural, unshakable clarity of a mind that has finally learned how to stay awake.